So LitMG writes, I was thinking about choosing between the Canon R6, Mark II, Canon R8, and R7. I do videography. I can low-key invest in one of these cameras with my budget. I just don't know which one to invest in, honestly. I shoot a lot of sports videos and portrait hybrid shooter. I would love the extra reach on the R7, and the R8 is $1,000 less than the R6 Mark II, with low-key the same future. And the R6 Mark II check off all the boxes I need in a camera. Plus, I can keep growing with that camera in the next few years, inshallah. But at the cost of $2,500, I'm really going back and forth at this point. What is your opinion? Are you shooting in low light settings? And then R6 Mark II. If you absolutely definitely need the reach and higher resolution, then the R7. When it comes to videos, the R6 Mark II. When it comes to videos in multicam setting, you probably go with two R7s. The two R7 is just a little bit more expensive than one R6 Mark II. Whereas if you get one R6 Mark II and one R8, that's still significantly more expensive than two R7s. But again, it really comes down to what's paying the bills. Having had the Canon R8 and the R6 Mark II both rented, and for about over a month, I had the Canon R10 from a friend of mine who had purchased it, but he went overseas, so he loaned it to me. And so, in comparison with all of these cameras, I'll tell you right now, when it comes to photos, that 32 megapixels is great. I absolutely love it. In fact, I will still use the Canon M6 Mark II for anything photography related. That is my go-to, without a doubt. And mind you, only recently I picked up a 5D Mark III used, the 10-year-old camera. Right now I can tell you, although it's lower megapixels, significant, I think it's 20 megapixels, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check here. So the 5D Mark III actually has 21 megapixels, so significantly less, but the images coming out of that thing are beautiful. The dynamic range, it's one of those things where on full frame, you don't know what you're missing until you have it. And then when you don't have it anymore, it's like, I missed that. And so I've been a crop sensor shooter for a long time. Only recently, in the last couple of years, did I get the taste of what full frame is. So, and by being a crop sensor user, I'm saying for the longest time when it came to video, 1-inch sensor cameras all day. The XD cams, they're all 1-inch sensor cameras. Micro Four Thirds, the M6 Mark II and the EOS M, which is, let me just disable this right here, which is right here, the EOS M. These are all crop sensor cameras. So I've been using crop sensor cameras for a long time, and I've been very happy with it. It's been enabled me to achieve everything that I want to achieve, except that when I got to full frame, I realized what I was missing in the range, the dynamic range between the shadows and the highlights of pictures when it comes to being outside, especially in brighter environments. More than the biggest discovery was when I started working with log-based footage, especially on Sony cameras. The S-Log2 and S-Log3 is brilliant, taking a lot of that cap information and baking it into an MP4 file that you can then extract within a log profile, which is great. But when it comes to a full frame camera, a lot of that information is still there. A7C has that, but all those log profiles are still there. The R6 Mark II and the R8 with the C-Log3 picture profile, a lot of the highlight information is all there. So that's something, and especially in low light settings, the amount of clarity I still have in the image, especially at higher ISO, like 12,800. Like 12,800 on the M6 Mark II, for example, or even the R7, it's not really like, it's noticeably grainy. You can turn on noise reduction within the camera, then it looks muddy. You can need to do noise reduction in computer, within Adobe Premiere or whatever your editing software is, and it does a great job, but then now you're exponentially increasing your render times. So these are all factors that you want to consider. Now, one of the things I'll tell you right now, when I had the R7 for over a month, and then when my buddy came back from overseas, when I handed it back to him, I was genuinely missing that camera. This is the R7, not the R7, I'm sorry, this is the R10. So I was genuinely missing that camera. Your question is about the Canon R7. Now, the R7 is about the same size, maybe slightly bigger than the R10. The R7 also has higher megapixel count. These cameras, they just feel so good in the hand, right? The way that the ergonomics are designed, Canon is second to none with relation to that. The R8 felt good. The R6 Mark II felt way better. It just fit in the hand. It fit in my hand like this here is the GH5. And as good as this feels, the R6 Mark II felt even better. There's something about the way these guys designed the hand grip and just the way it fits in your hand and for you to hold it, like it just felt perfect for me. I don't know what the size of your palm is and how that goes into the ergonomics of the camera, but in comparison to all the other Canon cameras I've had, more than the 5D Mark III, more than the GH5, which is a Lumix camera, more than the M6 Mark II, the R10, the R8, the R6 Mark II just felt excellent in my hand. And I've held the R5 also. It felt, both of these cameras are identical in the way that they feel, the ergonomics. It makes you want to shoot more. That's the thing. I don't know how else to put it, how else to articulate this idea that these cameras, just like when I have them in my hand, I want to go out and shoot, which is great because that's essentially what a camera is supposed to inspire, right? This technology is supposed to inspire you to go out and, produce more, create more, be productive, that kind of thing. After several weeks of having let it go, the thing that is only memorable about it, and from a negative standpoint, the thing that's memorable about it is that the digital eye is enhanced, just across the board. This is not specifically R6 Mark II, but across the board with all the new R-mount Canon cameras, the digital eye is enhanced is just wonky. It just follows your head if you zoom in real close. But if you're not following a person, it tends to be, I guess, okay. But outside of that, it's a brilliant camera. So now the question then is, because I'm looking at also from the perspective of like, who is the R8 for? Who is the R7 for? And I don't know if that's the appropriate approach because, everybody is different. I know for me, the R7 seems like a great indoor controlled setting studio type of camera, right? Live streaming kind of, but it's an expensive camera just for that. I think it's a great wildlife camera. Like you said before, you get greater reach with the R7 and the R10 because it's a crop sensor camera. But the question is, how much reach do you need, right? When you're talking about sports video, like I've got here, so let me just turn this off. So I've got here a Tokina 80 to 400 millimeter, right? Like on a full frame, how much more reach do you need, right? I can shoot the moon with this thing, right? And so, in my experience, again, with the kind of shooting that I've done, when it comes to sports with relation to jiu-jitsu, yeah, having a crop sensor camera has been clutch, especially with the GH5. If I go to a jiu-jitsu tournament and I'm trying to capture not the match that's happening in front of me, but the match that's happening too far away on a 70 to 200 with the extended teleconverter option built into the camera, like, yeah, that's something that's really helpful. But if you plan beforehand, right? Like, would I go out with a GH5 in the future if I had the R6 Mark II? No, because before I didn't have the 80 to 200, 80 to 400 millimeter zoom. I had the 70 or 80 to 200. Now I have an 80 to 400. I don't like 400 millimeters or 300 millimeters. That's like more than enough for capturing things that are far away. But again, like when you talk about sports videos, like how far along are you talking? Like we did, I think I had this guy for Yeah, we went to a monster truck show, right? I feel like with the I think I had the R10, but I forgot which camera I had. But regardless of which camera I had, it was a crop sensor camera. And for the stuff that was happening in the distance, I felt like 150 millimeter was more than enough. 200 millimeter was a little tight, and I'm sitting in the audience capturing the stuff and that's happening in the stage, or with the monster trucks and the dirt bikes and things like that. When it comes to jiu-jitsu, again, like, what are you shooting that would require you to have that much more reach? So that you can't do with getting a decent, telephoto zoom lens that would allow you to capture that image. So for me, it's about having the right lenses. And if you have just in terms of cost, this guy right here, 80 to 400 millimeter zoom lens, cost me $250 on eBay. The thing is, lenses are really cheap nowadays. So that's why, in the context of like Canon and anything that has good compatibility with EF lenses, like, yeah, I mean, if I wanted to buy a Canon camera specifically today, R6 Mark II, I think hands down. If I were to create a multi-camera setup, then I would probably then purchase two R7s, just because of the budget factor. If I'm doing a multi-camera setup where everything is in control, right? I'm controlling the lighting, I'm controlling, my environment, then yeah, I don't need the extra low light that I would get from a full frame camera. I don't need the lower noise that would get from, and I don't need extra reach, so to speak, but I can definitely take advantage of that reach. But if I'm in a control setting, that becomes a moot point. One of the thoughts I was having is like about the R8. The R8, I feel like, is a great, either it's a good first camera for somebody who doesn't know much about photography but wants to get into it and wants to become professional. And so it might be a good starting camera, but know that you're going to need a whole slew of batteries, at least, minimum three to be able to get by. But I would advise 4 to 5 batteries, whereas with the R6 Mark II, 2 is more than enough. 3 maybe if you need to have all day redundancy. Now with the R8, if you don't mind size but cost is a big factor, this right here is a little thing from Small Rig. So essentially, you've got your camera, right? You got your V-mount battery plate, right? And it becomes something like this. Now your camera is no longer small, right? Because you've got a little V-mount battery and stuff, but now you have all day battery life. That's one of the biggest drawbacks of the R8 is the battery life itself. But getting something like this might cost you like, I don't know, $200-300. So that might resolve the issue. But that's where I feel like the R8, if I were creating a multicam setup, I would probably then consider an R6 Mark II and an R8 with V-mount battery as such. And so, but then again, if I'm doing multicam, I'm going to go with V-mount batteries regardless. So V-mount batteries or plugged into a wall. So yeah, I mean, so I guess when it comes to the cost of $2,500, there's another factor you got to look at is this something that you're getting as a hobby, right? You talk about you do videography, and so you're talking about this gear being an investment. Therefore, the use of this gear is essentially putting money into your pocket, right? So it's an asset in that regard. So therefore, I would say if you're going to be using these tools to earn money, then for sure, use it, get the $2,500 or spend the $2,500 on the R6 Mark II, and just take into consideration, based on the projects and the gigs that you have and the upcoming projects that you have in your mind, how many of those, 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever your profitability is, how many of those will it take for the camera to have paid for itself? I think that's the real question with relation to economic value of the camera that you would be getting. From my perspective, I would do my best to swing it and get myself an R6 Mark II. And if I needed a second camera, I get the R8 with the V-mount solution to address it. because both of them are essentially the same camera with relation to sensor and the image coming out of it. Is just the usability and the ergonomics and power output, and the IBIS or lack thereof is the key difference. Well, when it comes to reach, IBIS is essentially you gotta have it, right? It's something that it pays for itself. And in fact, I find the combination of digital IS, lens IS, and image sensor stabilization, 3 in combo, you don't need gyro data stabilization unless you're going to do some real fast running and jumping around. But if you're doing the regular shots, maybe some movement, some walking, the three stabilization combo, I think is something that is going to be clutch. So I think the real question is a question between the R6 Mark II and the R7. That's what I think it is. The R8 is, from the sound of it, you're not a beginner. You're not starting out. And so if you're not starting out, the R8 is a B cam. It's a good B cam. It's a good backup. And so for that reason, we're looking at an R6 Mark II and an R7. And the situation between the two of them is really going to come down to, because both of them have IBIS, both of them have dual card slots, they're both identical, except one is essentially crop sensor. And so with relation to what is more important, having reach or having low noise in lower light settings. And so, and there is a difference. You're going to get a better image with full frame versus a crop sensor with a focal reducer, speed booster attached to it. Hands down, you're going to get a better image on the full frame. But the price difference between the R7 on Amazon and B&H is going for about $1,400 versus $2,500 of the R6 Mark II. So essentially, for $1,000 more, if you're talking about video, the reach is not a factor because you can do crop mode in the R6 Mark II. If you talk about photos, then yeah, you're going to get more reach with the R7 because of the fact that you have a higher resolution picture, so you'll be able to crop into the picture a lot more. And there's no, you don't crop mode with photos. You already had a 24 megapixel sensor on the R6 Mark II. So if you crop in more to that, now you're losing a lot of resolution. And so whereas with 32 megapixels being cropped into 20 megapixels, that's fine. That's totally okay. But 24 megapixels being cropped in, the same amount of crop will probably result in a 15 megapixel camera. If it comes down to sharing pictures on social, I don't think it matters. But if it comes down to sharing pictures with clients, and maybe they want to do some prints or advertising type of stuff, that kind of work, then yeah, that's going to matter. So that's something to definitely take into consideration, what kind of photos and what kind of videos. Because the good thing is with photos, you can run that ISO up real high, and that's okay because on photos it's fine. Grain is fine, and you can even reduce it. And I think the grain reduction in a single frame is significantly better. But if you're doing video, the processing time that goes into noise reduction is significantly higher, and that's where the drawback is. So I guess if you're talking about, that's what it comes down to, man. Are you shooting in low light settings? And then R6 Mark II. If you absolutely definitely need the reach and higher resolution, then the R7. When it comes to videos, the R6 Mark II. When it comes to videos in multicam setting, you probably go with 2 R7s. And the 2 R7 is just a little bit more expensive than 1 R6 Mark II. Whereas if you get 1 R6 Mark II and 1 R8, that's still significantly more expensive than two R7s. But again, it really comes down to what's paying the bills. You run the numbers, it's your business, and from there you'll know which is the more economic decision. Because at the end of the day, these are cameras. They're good now. 5 years from now, they'll probably still be good. But after that, you probably want to consider upgrading. So the question is, will you be able to get your money's worth 10 times, 20 times within now and the next 3 to 5 years? Hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. I'll see you soon.